Hi, everyone. I will be presenting the portion of our presentation on deepfake legislation. So I will bring up the presentation. Okay, great. I will say that this presentation is focused on the United States, both at the federal level and the state level. Okay. All right, so starting with federal legislation. Deepfakes Accountability Act would require developers and online platforms to make their outputs digital provenance compliant, which means there'd be technical identification of the origin of a given piece of media. Requires online platforms to establish a method of detection of synthetic media. So that includes deepfakes. Requires clear labeling of synthetic media, including identification of what was altered specifically, and provides legal recourse against malicious unlabeled impersonations, and instructs the Department of Homeland Security to establish a deepfake task force to research and develop methods to detect or otherwise counter and combat synthetic media. This, as well as the other legislation that follows, have been proposed, but they have not been enacted, meaning they're not law. They're just legislation, or they're just bills for now. The No Fakes Act would hold individuals or companies liable if they produce an unauthorized digital replica of an individual in a performance. Would hold platforms liable for hosting an unauthorized digital replica if the platform has knowledge of the fact that the replica was not authorized by the individual depicted, and excludes certain digital replicas from coverage based on recognized First Amendment protections. And that goes without saying for most of the other legislation as well. The No AI Fraud Act is focused on consumer protection. So it grants individuals property right to their voice and visual likeness, making publication and distribution of all forms of harmful, non-consensual synthetic media liable to pay $5,000 per violation in damages, and includes a penalty for $50,000 for distributing personalized cloning services capable of creating such non-consensual synthetic media. Preventing Deepfake Scams Act would establish a task force to study the impact of AI on fraud and make proposals on regulation that would best protect consumers from fraud. Preventing Deepfakes of Intimate Images Act would make non-consensual deepfake porn illegal, punishable by up to 2 years in prison. In the pipeline, the Center for AI Policy is working on legislation that would develop the government's capacity to evaluate and forecast AI's capabilities, require high-risk AI developers to apply for permits and follow safety measures, hold high-risk AI developers strictly liable for severe harms, empower regulators to pause AI projects if they identify a clear emergency, and provide additional funding for NIST and BIS. Bill sponsors are to be determined, so stay tuned for that. All right, moving on to state legislation. There are several election-related bills. So legislation that would ban media created with the help from AI before elections, unless there's a disclosure, have been introduced in Hawaii, South Dakota, Massachusetts, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Indiana, and Wyoming. A bill that would ban disseminating all deepfakes within 60 days of an election was introduced in Nebraska, and a bill that would require disclosure of deceptive AI use in political advertising was introduced in New Hampshire. What's really nice to see is that these states are pretty diverse geographically, and these bills have been introduced in a pretty bipartisan way. So it's nice to see that both Democrats and Republicans care a lot about these issues and are taking it seriously. There have been several bills regarding liability that have been introduced. So for example, legislation that would ban disseminating deepfakes if the people depicted in them haven't consented, while allowing them to sue for relief and damages, was introduced in Kentucky. A bill that would allow any resident or any candidate for public office who will appear on the ballot in the state to sue for relief or damages any people who publish a digital impersonation of that person was introduced in Arizona. And a bill that would require disclosure and allow the depicted people to sue the people who published the deepfake was introduced in Idaho. A few bills have been introduced regarding the use of deepfakes for the purpose of committing a crime. So in Virginia, Ohio, South Carolina, and New Hampshire, legislation has been introduced that would make it a misdemeanor for anyone to create any deceptive audio or visual media for the purpose of committing a criminal offense. Again, a mix of quite a mix of states here. And bills regarding just general disclosure requirements have been introduced in Alaska, Florida, and Colorado. All right, here's the exciting part. There have been laws that have been enacted in this country. Even if not at the federal level, we've got great legislation that has come out at the state level. So kudos to the states that have been leading the country on this and have laws that are currently in place. So first we've got Texas. Texas has 2 laws, which is exciting, and that I will discuss here. One regards pornography, and the other regards election, the time period leading up to an election. So Texas actually bans both 1, creating deepfake videos, and 2, publishing or distributing them within 30 days of an election. However, that's what it requires the intent to injure a candidate or influence the result of an election. And that's punishable by up to a year in jail and fines up to $4,000. The deepfake pornography law bans knowingly producing or distributing non-consensual deepfake pornography, and that's punishable by up to a year in jail and fines up to $4,000. Okay, so California also has 2, and pretty similar in regard with respect to the 2 the 2 areas that I had just discussed in Texas. So the one on deepfake pornography differs because it allows a person to sue who's the target of deepfake pornography, to sue the person to sue the other person who created the material, so they can recover economic and non-economic damages, including emotional distress, or statutory damages of at least $1,500, but no more than $30,000. Or if the act was committed with malice, up to $150,000, as well as punitive damages, attorney's fees and costs, and injunctive relief. And then the election-related bill, or law rather, prohibits producing, distributing, publishing, or broadcasting with actual malice campaign material that contains a picture or photograph of a person or persons into which the image of a candidate for public office is superimposed, or which another person is superimposed, unless the campaign material contains a specified disclosure. Now, these 2 laws these two pieces of legislation were signed into law, rather, by Governor Gavin Newsom in 2019. And the election one was supposed to sunset on January 1st, 2023. And California passed another law extending the sunset date from 2023 through 2027. So it's still in effect. And hopefully it will continue to stay into effect past 2027 because this issue will probably not subside. Next, we have Michigan. Michigan has a law that prohibits the distribution of material or deceptive media 90 days prior to an election, unless there's a disclosure. Enforcement is contingent on whether the person responsible falsely represents the person depicted in it, and that the person intends the distribution to harm the reputation or electoral prospects of a candidate in an election. And this is punishable by up to 90 days in prison or a fine of up to $500. This is a picture of the ceiling of the state capitol. So yes, the states that have enacted laws are rewarded with pictures on their slides. All right, next we have Minnesota. Minnesota has a law that bans the publication of deepfake media to influence an election in the 90-day window prior to an election in the state, if they know or reasonably should know that the item being disseminated is a deepfake, if the media is shared without the consent of the depicted individual, and is made with the intent to injure a candidate or influence the result of an election. And this is punishable by up to 90 days prison or fines of up to $1,000. Washington state requires a disclosure be put on synthetic media that is being used to influence an election. The law defines synthetic as any image, audio, or video of an individual's appearance, speech, or conduct that has been intentionally manipulated with the use of generative adversarial network techniques or other digital technology in a manner to create a realistic but false image, audio, or video. Wisconsin requires the label contains content generated by AI, and that it must be applied to at the beginning and end of all campaign-related audio and visual media distributed to the public, and a violation of this law is punishable by a $1,000 penalty for each offense. All right, the final section of this presentation. What can we do? You've learned a lot about deepfakes from this presentation, both from Peter's section and my own. And you might be wondering what you can do to put this knowledge into action. You can contact your elected officials. And at the federal level, you have a U.S. representative, so your member of Congress who is in the U.S. House. And if you're not sure who that person is, you can look them up through the link here. You can input your zip code and the information will pop up. And then depending on which state you live in, it's a little bit easier. You don't have to use your zip code or anything like that. Each state has 2 U.S. senators. So you can write to both of them. They're both your senators. So you can write to your 2 U.S. senators and your 1 U.S. representative, or you can make a call. So once you figure out who they are, you go to their website, and all their websites have an online contact form that you can fill out. And they also have phone numbers. So you can either send a note through the online contact form, or you can make a call. Yeah, I know people are pretty nervous about this. Sometimes they think, I'm not an expert, so who am I to contact my member of Congress or any of my elected officials about these issues. But they do keep track of this, and they really do want to hear from their constituents. Someone could be a subject matter expert, and they could call every single member of Congress, and that's helpful. But, the members of Congress want to hear from the people who they represent, because that's their job. Their job is to represent you. And so even if you just call them up and say, I attended a webinar about deepfakes, and I'm really concerned about this issue, and I think you should support legislation that would regulate or ban deepfakes, and that's it. And you don't even name the legislation by number or even by name. Like, even that is helpful. Just saying that you care about an issue and that you want them to take action on that issue can be very, very helpful. You will not be talking to the member of Congress directly. You'll be talking to a member of the staff, or if you leave a message, you'll be leaving a message for a member of their staff to listen to. But they do keep a tally oftentimes. They keep track of which issues people are calling about. So even if your call or your email through the online contact form isn't very specific, it does help a lot. And it adds another another tally to the tally that they keep track of. Another thing you can do is join the movement. So we're really grateful that you're here and that you are paying attention to this issue. And if you're here today, that's wonderful. If you're watching a recording of this, that's also wonderful. So you can join the movement. You can do that by checking out our website, so stakeout.ai. As Peter said earlier, you can also donate to the organization. So you can access that through this tiny URL, and we would really appreciate it. So just to wrap us up with more positive things, history shows that there is power when people band together. Your contribution, whether big or small, will help us mobilize and inform everyone else about the crucial AI risks that are harming humanity now and will do so in the future. Thank you so much for joining us again. Here is our website, our email address, and yeah, feel free to contact us if you'd like to learn more and or if you want to get more involved. Thank you. Okay, I'll answer Joanna's question, the difference between a bill and a law. So a bill has been introduced and it's not in effect. So a law is something that we live under. It's a ban, for example, if we're talking about deepfake bans, it would be a ban that is currently in effect. A bill means that it's in the legislative body still. So the legislation has not been passed, but it may be awaiting a vote. It may be in the relevant committee, but that's the difference between bill and law. Are there many bills that don't make it as law? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And sometimes what happens is there will be multiple bills or pieces of legislation that are similar, or there may be a bill in the House and there's a similar one in the Senate, but there are a few differences. So then they need to be reconciled, meaning the differences kind of have to be hashed out. Yeah, but sometimes what happens is there are multiple bills on the same issue, and legislators have to internally, I mean, there are negotiations that are made here. They decide which one is best and move that one forward. Or sometimes what happens is there are bills that sit there and there's just not enough political motivation to move them forward. A bill can die in committee if the committee chair doesn't set it for a vote, or if there's a bill that people like you and me don't seem to care about it. If there aren't constituents who are advocating for it, there may not be political pressure for legislators to move it forward. They have a lot of priorities. There's so many issues out there. And so they have to pick and choose what they prioritize. So it's incumbent upon us as their constituents and as people to let them know what we care about, so they prioritize these issues and move it forward. So we just voice our concern about deep fakes and hope for the best. Yeah. I mean, there are multiple things that we voice our concerns. That's one thing that we can do in the immediate term. Another thing that we can do is we can ask candidates what they think and where they stand on the issue. So if you ever attend a debate, like a political debate or a candidate forum or anything like that, if someone is running for office in your area, you can ask them what they think about this, and they'll have to answer you. They'll have to come up with a stance on the subject. And if they don't have a stance yet, then your question will make them think, and it will make them do research, and it will make them realize that this is an issue that should be on their radar. How do we apply this pressure? Great questions. I love your questions, Joanna. So contacting them through their forums online for members of the House and Senate, at the federal level, making the calls. What we're doing, we're educating people. And so that's a big thing too, because people won't act if they don't on an issue, if they don't really know about the issue or if they don't know the importance of it. So educating your friends and family on this issue is very helpful. People power is incredibly important. And so the more of us who care about the issue, the more likely something will be done about it. So we hope that you'll spread the word on this issue. Finally, what I'd like to say is that local at the state level is far more accessible than a lot of people realize. I don't know what state you live in, but a lot of state legislatures have members who have very small staff, a small number of staff. And so you're more likely to make connections and actually speak with the member themselves rather than a staff member, or develop relationships or move the needle if you contact your state representative. So yeah, like your member of Congress may have a member of Congress has a much larger staff and is less accessible most of the time than a state representative who has 2 members of their staff. And if you set up a meeting with a state legislator and, you get some friends and you all go together, it can make a big impact. As we've seen, there's been quite a bit of movement at the state level that just hasn't happened at the federal level. And when it seems like there's a lot of gridlock in Washington, there's a lot that's getting done at the state level. Calling them will not bombard them. That's your next question. It's not a bad thing necessarily to bombard them. I mean, that is political pressure. And it works. If they're receiving lots and lots of calls, they're going to pay attention. It's going to seem like, okay, this is something that we need to take seriously. A lot of my constituents care about it, so I need to care about it, right? Because if a lot of their constituents are calling about an issue and the member of Congress just doesn't do anything on the issue, then the member of Congress has to worry, maybe they won't get reelected, or maybe they'll have a primary challenger or something, because they haven't acted on the issue. So, yeah, I mean, the more pressure, the better. And there may be some lobbyists who are able to go to Washington and meet with people in person, but the constituents, people like you and me, really matter.
How to take to federal law level? Asks May Robinson. You
Yeah,
want to take this, Amy?
sure. Like we've seen here from this presentation, there have been several bills that have been proposed, and there's one that's in the works from the Center for AI Policy. Um, and yeah, I mean, we're seeing some positive moves. There's a new task force that's bipartisan on AI, and so I think members of Congress are starting to pay more attention to this. But in order to get this legislation passed, there needs to be pressure from everyday people. There needs to be advocacy. And you can do that and be engaged in that through some of the ways I described earlier.
Uh, to answer May Robinson's question about is the text to video model OpenAI Sora available to the public? Um, so I just checked the website right now. So since the AI landscape is changing so fast, like, my information can be outdated today. So I just checked the website. Today, Sora is becoming available to red teamers to assess critical areas for harms or risks. We are also granting access to a number of visual artists, designers, and filmmakers, giving feedback on how to advance the model to be most helpful for creative professionals. So based on this paragraph, it seems like it's not fully open. Um, and I think it's it's a good, it's generally a good thing to red team models. Uh, Red teaming is the process where you instead of just assuming everything will work out, you test it for problems and try to identify them before release. Um, Now, when they say we are also granting access to a number of visual artists, designers, and filmmakers to gain feedback, the first thing I think of is that um, in we at Segai are in conversations with many of these visual artists and designers and filmmakers, and when they feel like their hard work, their copyrighted hard work, is stolen by just how these models are trained, um, just the way these generative AI models are trained is the training data is scraped from the internet, and a lot of this training data, especially the really high quality one, um, are copyrighted hard work of artists, and the artists then have to compete with the very AI models trained on their stolen hard copyrighted work, trained by the AI companies, and it's a very hard economic outlook for them. Um, so on this, I would say, I wish the number of visual artists, designers, and filmmakers best of luck, but I also think it's an open question for our society whether, for example, like when the New York Times sued OpenAI, that their data was uh, stolen and models were trained, and then they were competing against the New York Times journalists against the marketplace, New York Times against the marketplace. Um, it's going to be very important what the resolution of this question is. for things like the profitability of Gen AI as a paradigm. Things um, will uh, the capability advance that we saw historically, which I think was quite rapid, will the capability advances continue to be quick, or will they slow down? If, for example, uh, like a lot of the training data is considered off limits because they amount to the scraping amounts to stealing hardware copyrighted data. These questions, I think, again, fair use questions are again, actually, I not legal advice. So I'll just say that in terms of the legislative option, um, like in terms of the legislative option, if people want something to happen and they want something to happen at a strong enough level to the point where they demand politically to their representatives, hey, we really want this. That is, I think, uh, that is, in my opinion, at least, a more robust strategy to achieve certain goals than the judicial method, where it's about judges' decisions. And again, not legal advice, but I have heard from legal experts that uh, fair use decisions, especially in new settings, is quite done on a case-by-case basis. Again, this is not legal advice. Um, so in terms of strategy, I think the legislative option is more promising, arguably. Um, and in terms of the legislative option, I think what the society we live in is the society we want according to the people who voice their opinions, according to the democratic aggregate of their opinions. And I think although this process is not always smooth or perfect, especially when there's rapid upheavals like the rapid AI capabilities advances, um, yeah, I think uh that's why uh I think that's why a strategy that depends on getting a lot of people to realize the very serious harms that are happening, and also the very serious harms that will happen in the future, and don't feel hopeless about it and raise their democratic voices, call their representatives, as Amy said, vote for the politicians who support the policies that you think will help protect people. I think that's going to be at least I think that is a again we should every avenue is worth pursuing in terms of preventing the harms posed by um, the dangerous unaccountable AI race, including both the legislative and lawsuit options. Every, everything counts, but I do think it's very uh, democratic mobilization, I think is both robust and also just, I think, how our country uh, is just how our country is and makes collective decisions. And so, there's a lot of reasons why I personally am most excited about this strategy. But again, all the strategies are worth pursuing. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We're very honored to give this educational webinar. Uh, I hope this was informative, and I wish you uh, the best rest of your day. Please make your voices democratically heard in general, and also about uh, issues like deepfakes, issues like is the rapid advances of AI capabilities something that our society, what should we do as a society about it? Just in terms of questions like this, it would be great for you to make your voices heard democratically. Yeah, thank you so much.